Something is breaking inside the world's vaults, and the silence from Wall Street is deafening. We are witnessing the first global squeeze of the 21st century, a moment where paper promises meet physical reality. By the time you finish this video, the silver in your hand may be the only thing the banks can't take from you. On January 1st, 2026, the global silver market didn't just bend, it snapped. While you were sleeping, a $15 per ounce price gap opened between East and West, effectively bankrupting three major too-big-to-fail bullion banks in a single trading session. If you've ever wondered why your local bank is suddenly limiting cash withdrawals while the experts claim the economy is fine, this is for you. We thought the vaults were full. We were wrong. In the last 4 months, India didn't just buy silver. They executed a hostile takeover of the market, importing $5.9 billion of the metal. Compare that to the $1.5 billion yearly average, and you realize the world isn't just changing, it's resetting. This represents a 400% surge that mirrors the pre-collapse signals of 1929, when physical commodities vanished from Western markets just months before the Great Crash. But numbers on a screen don't tell the whole story. Let me take you inside a Swiss refinery in December 2025. Hans Müller has been running his family's silver refining operation for 37 years. He's processed metal through recessions, bull markets, and crashes, but he'd never seen anything like this. His order books, typically filled 3 to 6 months out, were suddenly backlogged by 18 months. Major industrial clients were calling daily, offering premiums of 20, 30, even 50% above spot price for immediate delivery. They weren't negotiating. They were begging. The phone calls came from everywhere. Solar panel manufacturers in California, electronics producers in Taiwan, automotive suppliers in Germany, all of them saying the same thing. We need physical metal, and we need it now. The price doesn't matter. Hans told me something chilling. For the first time in my career, I have customers with unlimited budgets who cannot get metal. That's not a market. That's a war. This isn't a shortage in India. It's a vacuum in your backyard. The metal that was supposed to be sitting in London vaults, in New York depositories, in Toronto warehouses, it's gone. Drained eastward in a silent exodus that accelerated through 2025 and reached critical mass as the calendar flipped to 2026. The refiners see it first. They're the canaries in the coal mine. When a refiner in Switzerland is turning away century-old clients because he physically cannot source enough feedstock, that's not a supply hiccup. That's a structural break in the global commodity system. But the missing metal wasn't the real crisis. The real crisis was where the price just went. Why is the same ounce of silver worth $94 in New York but $105 in Shanghai? This question breaks everything we thought we knew about modern markets. In a truly globalized world with instant communication and sophisticated arbitrage systems, price discrepancies like this shouldn't exist for more than minutes, maybe hours. Instead, this $11 premium has been widening for months. The Shanghai Gold Exchange reported a record $11 premium in early January, 57% higher than the systemic failure threshold observed in 2011. Back then, a $6 premium triggered emergency interventions from central banks. That was considered a 5-alarm fire. What we're seeing now is 57% beyond that panic level, and the response from Western financial authorities has been near total silence. Think of global silver like water in 2 connected tanks. New York is at $94 per ounce. Shanghai is at $105. Basic physics says that gap should equalize instantly. Arbitrageurs should buy in New York, sell in Shanghai, pocket the difference, and the prices should converge. That's how markets are supposed to work. But it's not happening. The $11 gap acts like a massive pump, sucking every available ounce out of the West. The banks call this liquidity adjustment, but in reality, it's a bank run on a planetary scale. Every single deliverable ounce in London, New York, and Zurich is being pulled toward the Shanghai premium like metal filings to a magnet. Dr. Sarah Chun, a commodities researcher who spent 15 years analyzing precious metals flows, explained it to me this way. We're seeing ghost prices. The $94 on your screen represents a market that no longer exists in physical form. It's a legacy number, a historical artifact being maintained by paper contracts. The real price, the price where actual metal changes hands, is in Shanghai, and it's $11 higher. Here's where it gets truly disturbing. Researchers analyzing COMEX warehouse receipts and bank derivative positions found that for every physical ounce sitting in a vault, there are now approximately 500 paper claims. 500 different entities believe they own rights to the same single ounce of metal. This isn't normal market leverage. This is systemic fraud on a scale that makes the 2008 mortgage crisis look quaint. At least with mortgages, there were actual houses. Here, we're talking about claims on metal that simply doesn't exist. The implications are staggering. If even 5% of those paper claim holders demand physical delivery simultaneously, the entire system collapses. There is no cavalry coming. There is no emergency silver reserve that central banks can tap. The metal either exists or it doesn't, and right now, it doesn't. Investment banks have been playing a shell game for decades, moving the same inventory between vaults, counting it multiple times, using accounting tricks that would land a private citizen in prison. The Shanghai premium is the market's way of calling their bluff. And then, China did the unthinkable. They locked the doors. Your bank uses silver as collateral. But that collateral just became a geopolitical hostage. On January 1st, 2026, China implemented comprehensive export restrictions on silver and strategic metals. The official justification was national security and resource preservation for domestic green energy initiatives. The practical effect was immediate and devastating. China became a roach motel for silver. The metal checks in, but it never comes out. As of mid-January, China's export ban has cut off 60% of the West's industrial supply line. 60%. Let that sink in. More than half of the silver that Western industry depends on for solar panels, electric vehicles, 5G infrastructure, and advanced electronics is now trapped behind a regulatory wall. This isn't just about industry. This is about the foundation of Western banking. Modern fractional reserve banking operates on the assumption that collateral assets remain liquid and accessible. Silver, like gold and other commodities, has been used as high-quality collateral for decades. Banks borrow against it, hedge with it, and use it to meet capital requirements. But what happens when that collateral is in China, and China says it's not leaving? Let me walk you through a real case study. In December, a mid-sized solar panel manufacturer in Ohio received notice that their silver supply contract was being terminated. Not renegotiated. Terminated. Their supplier, who had reliably delivered for 11 years, sent a 2-paragraph email citing force majeure and wishing them well. No apology. No alternative offered. The Ohio plant employed 370 people. They had signed contracts for panel deliveries through 2028. Their entire business model required a steady flow of silver paste for photovoltaic cells. Within 6 weeks of that email, they announced indefinite suspension of operations. 370 families now facing uncertainty because a metal supply chain broke 6,000 miles away. The plant manager tried everything. He called competitors. He contacted refiners directly. He even explored recycling operations to reclaim silver from old panels. Nothing worked. The industrial-grade silver he needed, in the quantities he needed, at a price his contracts could support, it simply didn't exist in accessible markets anymore. This is happening across dozens of industries. Electronics manufacturers are hoarding inventory. Automotive suppliers are redesigning components to use less silver or find substitutes. Medical device companies are facing the nightmare scenario of not being able to produce critical equipment because they can't source materials. But here's the part that should terrify you. If the metal can't leave China, the dollars in your bank are backed by nothing but air. Modern banking is a confidence game built on the assumption that assets are interchangeable and borders are porous to capital flows. China just proved both assumptions wrong. They demonstrated that physical reality trumps financial contracts. They showed that resource nationalism is back, and it's more powerful than any trade agreement. The 3 major bullion banks that collapsed on January 1st weren't brought down by bad loans or risky derivatives in the traditional sense. They were destroyed by a simple fact. They had sold obligations to deliver metal they didn't have, and when counterparties demanded delivery, the banks couldn't perform. In legal terms, they were insolvent the moment the Shanghai premium hit $11 and the China export ban took effect. One bank executive, speaking anonymously to financial media, said, "We had warehouse receipts. We had futures contracts. We had every piece of paper that said we own the metal, but when we went to actually move it, it wasn't there. It had been double-pledged, triple-pledged. Some of it existed only in accounting systems. The physical reality caught up with the financial fiction. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are now facing an impossible choice. Do they bail out the bullion banks and admit the commodity markets are fraudulent? Or do they let them fail and risk a cascade that brings down the entire precious metals trading system? Neither option is good. Both reveal a truth the financial establishment has tried desperately to hide. We've been operating on borrowed time and borrowed metal for decades. But there is one final signal that proves the collapse has already begun. The smart money isn't buying tech stocks anymore. They're buying rocks. The Nifty Metal Index, a benchmark tracking metal and mining stocks, hit an 11-year high in the first week of January 2026. This isn't a subtle shift. This is a screaming alarm. When metal indices outperform technology, finance, and growth sectors, it signals one thing. The big institutional players are rotating out of paper assets and into hard physical reality. This rotation has happened only a few times in modern history. In the late 1970s, before gold hit $800 an ounce. In the mid-2000s, before the commodity supercycle that peaked in 2011. And now, portfolio managers who spent careers dismissing gold bugs and silver stackers are quietly accumulating mining stocks. Sovereign wealth funds are buying physical inventory directly from refiners. Family offices are converting bonds and equities into commodity exposure at a pace not seen since the Cold War. Why? Because they've done the math, and the math is terrifying. The green energy transition that governments worldwide have committed to requires staggering amounts of silver. Every solar panel, every electric vehicle, every 5G tower, every advanced battery system. The demand curve for the next decade is almost vertical. Meanwhile, mining production has been flat or declining since 2016. You cannot print a silver bar. You cannot quantitatively ease an ounce of metal into existence. Either you dig it out of the ground, or you don't have it. And we're not digging enough. The industry calls this the green energy trap. Politicians made promises that physics cannot keep. They committed to deadlines that geology cannot meet. They signed treaties based on resource availability that doesn't exist. China understood this years ago. That's why they've been quietly accumulating. That's why their export ban was so precisely timed. They looked at the math and realized, whoever controls the physical metals controls the 21st century economy. Everything else is noise. For those paying attention, the Nifty Metal Index surge isn't a rally. It's a lifeboat. It's the market's way of saying the paper era is ending and the age of physical scarcity is beginning. The few who see the commodity supercycle now are the ones who will own the next decade. But this raises an uncomfortable question that most people aren't ready to face. Is your bank safe? The math says no. Here's the final truth. Banks operate on fractional reserves. They take your deposits and lend out multiples of that money, keeping only a small percentage in liquid assets. This works fine in normal times because not everyone withdraws simultaneously. But we're not in normal times. As commodity prices spike and physical scarcity becomes undeniable, more people will want to convert paper dollars into hard assets. They'll want to withdraw cash. They'll want to buy gold, silver, land, anything real. When that wave hits, fractional reserve banking breaks. The bank doesn't have your money. They have a ledger entry that says they owe you money. The actual cash, the actual assets, are tied up in loans, investments, and increasingly, in collateral that's trapped in China or doesn't exist at all. We are entering an era of resource apartheid, where access to physical materials matters more than the price on a screen. The $94 spot price you see is a ghost, a remnant of a system that's already dead but hasn't stopped moving yet. The lesson of the Shanghai squeeze is simple and brutal. You cannot print a silver bar. When the paper era dies, only the ones holding the molecules will be left standing. The global ledger is resetting. The promises made over decades are being called in. The vaults are being opened, and they're empty. What happens next will determine not just investment returns, but the structure of the global economy for the next generation. If the Shanghai squeeze forces your bank to freeze your account tomorrow, do you have enough physical reality to survive 30 days? That's not fear-mongering. That's mathematics. The metal is moving east. The prices are diverging. The banks are insolvent. The timeline is compressing. The wealth transfer of the century is happening right now, in real time, while most people are still checking their stock portfolios and trusting that the system will hold. It won't. The question isn't whether the reset is coming. The reset is here. The question is, which side of the line will you be on when the dust settles?